See, my friends, in the last live stream, we talked about the American attacks that were happening at that exact moment during our last live stream. The attacks are still going on in Iran, okay? At this very moment, the attacks are still going on. The explosions yesterday were heard in Bandar Abbas while we were talking in real time. And now here's the summary of the night so far, because the night delivered everything that had been promised, and the next day brought what no one expected. It was the biggest round since the end of the war, and the Americans didn't just hit what everyone expected, they hit a target up in northern Iran, far from everything, which reveals the entire strategy behind all of this. When I show you what this target is, you'll understand the game. The attacks are still going on right now, this wave is still underway, it's not over yet. Iran also retaliated during the night, and in the morning announced a new doctrine for the Strait of Hormuz, a statement that could change the rules as we know them so far, right? One of the most important in the world for that strait, and it hits you directly in the wallet, whether you're in Brazil, Portugal, Angola, or right here in Israel. But the day still had one more surprise, and this one came from where no one expected, a public clash between Trump and Israel. Trump announced that Israel is going to leave Lebanon, and this morning Israel's defense minister responded with a phrase that, in my opinion, has already gone down in history. It's already gone down in history, folks. I'll save it for the right moment in this video and let you know. It's only 2 lines long, but it's worth the entire video, and at the end, an update about that Trump plane, the old Trump plane, Air Force One. The story got another chapter today with a photo, and I'll share my take here on what it reveals about all of this, okay? Whoever leaves in the middle of this live stream will only get the headline, but whoever stays until the end will get the full picture. And before we start, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, because on a day like today, this channel is the only one that puts the pieces together for you, straight from Israel, right where everything is happening. Let's start with what happened during the night. The overnight round was exactly what the Americans promised. The biggest since the end of the war, since the end of the 40-day war, about 90 military targets were hit across Iranian territory. And just look at the list of what was hit because it reveals the strategy behind all of this. Air defense systems, radars, coastal radars, anti-ship missile positions, missile and drone depots, and the regime's command network. Add that to the previous day's round, right, the day before, when the Americans also took more than 60 Revolutionary Guard vessels off the board. And the fleet, that's the one the Guard uses to surround ships, collect fees, and keep piracy going in the strait. They're small vessels. And in the last live stream, I also showed you that the fight is about who controls those waters, the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, because the Americans went straight for the means of controlling those waters, which are these small vessels. And here's a comment. I have to make this comment. I thought the Iranian Navy didn't even exist anymore. And you probably thought the same thing, because that's what they sold to all of us, right? That Iran's military capability had been wiped out, that there was almost nothing left. But to hit 60 vessels in a single night, those 60 vessels have to exist. You can't take something off the board that wasn't there to begin with, right? Either the capability wasn't wiped out as they said, or Iran rebuilt way too fast. Either answer should keep those who promised the problem was over up at night. And the geography of the attacks expanded too. Yesterday it was just the coast of the strait. Tonight, the targets reached the far east of the country and went all the way up to the northeast, way up in Iran. These images are from early this morning, folks. And 2 of tonight's targets deserve a pause because they reveal the strategy. Kish Island is right at the mouth of the strait, and Tehran sees it as a central piece for controlling those waters, the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. Hitting this island means hitting the command center of the authority over the strait. And Chabahar is the only major port in Iran outside the Strait of Hormuz, the country's alternative gateway to the ocean. So leaving Chabahar in the dark is a warning. Not even your emergency exit is safe. What the map shows is that the Americans are warning they can reach any point in Iran, not just the area around the Strait of Hormuz. There was also a target confirming the threat from the last live stream. Remember that Trump said that if necessary he would take down the power and water plants in Iran? So, the attacks last night cut the power lines in Chabahar, which is one of the most important port cities in the country. The city was left in darkness early in the morning. The Iranian press confirmed this and said that out of the 3 transmission lines that were cut, 2 were reconnected this morning. He warned 2 of the plants, Trump, but for now he started by going after the cables. And the Iranian state press also confirmed the night's human toll, right? A firefighter lost his life at the Iran Muxar airport. There's 1 victim so far. For now, there might be more. More may appear, for now. 1 person died there, a firefighter, okay? He was not a member of the Revolutionary Guard. It's collateral damage from this war, right? A firefighter. And the Iranian army responded with a formal oath in a statement: "We will resist the enemy until our last breath, and we will avenge the blood of our people." On the Iranian side, the response came early in the morning. At 3 and at 3:05 a.m., the sirens sounded in Bahrain. Alerts were also issued in Qatar, and then they were cancelled because Qatar was not a target. And then it was Kuwait's turn, with the Kuwaiti Ministry of Defense announcing in real time, "We are facing Iranian drones and missiles." In the morning, the Revolutionary Guard officially claimed responsibility, giving the names and locations of the targets: 2 major American bases in Kuwait and 2 in Bahrain. In other words, the same targets as always. But pay attention to one of them, which is again in Bahrain, folks, because it closes that circle, right? It's the Jufair base, where the headquarters of the US 5th Fleet is located. In other words, Iran keeps targeting the same base, so it's not just any base, folks. They aimed at the headquarters, the American fleet that patrols exactly those disputed waters, the Strait of Hormuz. That message was carefully chosen, and the Guard even left a recorded threat. If the United States responds, the operations will expand to more bases in the region. And the United States is responding right now as we're talking, folks. While we're talking, the United States is attacking Iran once again in real time. Local time, 1:47 p.m. For everyone asking what the date of the video is, folks, it's right up here. Just look at the top of the screen. You'll see the date of the video. Here is the date of the video. You don't need to look anywhere else. Here, look. Okay? And Iran also released the score for tonight so far. They claim to have hit 85 American military targets in the region. And now pay attention to these two numbers because they tell a story you've already heard here. In the last live stream, I brought you the analysis from one of Israel's top experts on Iran's strategy. He described it like this: they hit 80 times. The Americans respond with 85. And from the Iranian point of view, the event is under control. So, look at the real score for tonight. The Americans hit, according to the Americans, about 90 targets until dawn, folks. By the end of the day there, end of the night, the alarm is going off now. It's going off. Bombs are falling in Iran right now. In other words, the 90 targets were hit during the night. Iran claims to have responded by hitting 85 targets. The analyst's scale has become the official scoreboard. It's the limited campaign ping pong happening right in front of you, number by number. Each side hammering the other and both pretending they control how far this escalates. For those who just joined, hit the like button so you don't forget to do it later, because you probably will forget, guys. And in the morning, Tehran formalized the new doctrine. An official source announced the new rules of the game on the regime's television, and every sentence is a message, so pay close attention. First rule: the Strait of Hormuz will be closed after each American attack. Second rule: Iran will strike at least twice as many enemy targets as the number of targets hit. Let's see if they will keep that promise. Third rule: Iran does not distinguish between the United States and its regional partners. And the source's conclusion was directed straight at Trump, saying, "Threats won't get you anything, but you'll lose the strait in the negotiations for a final agreement." And one of the most powerful men in the regime finished with the phrase that buries any negotiation about the Strait of Hormuz. He said the following: that the regime in the Strait of Hormuz will remain Iranian forever. Forever. Do you remember the protection scheme from the last live stream, right, guys? A fee of $2 million per oil tanker, the hole that China left in Iran's treasury. Well, the regime has just turned that scheme into eternal doctrine. It's no longer just an improvisation for this crisis, it's official policy. Hormuz is ours, and whoever passes without paying will pay in another way. And do the math with me on the double doctrine. They said they're going to respond twice as much, right? Because there's a math problem hidden in it that no one is talking about. The Americans hit about 90 targets last night. If the double doctrine is real, the next Iranian response will have to hit. It would have to hit 180 targets. And the Americans, by their logic, would respond with almost 400 targets. So you see, right? The double doctrine isn't a doctrine of war, it's a doctrine of escalation. Or Iran is bluffing, or this ladder doesn't have any safe steps left. And let's see what will happen now in this new round. The United States is starting it right now, folks, and the overwhelming response that the Iranian command promised yesterday. Didn't they promise that? Everyone was here, right? For now, it came in the usual form: drone attacks on neighboring countries. And an alleged tally of 85 overwhelming so far, my friend, only in the statement. For those supporters of the regime, only in the statement. And here's also a quick take on the situation. Just notice what Iran did. Despite the heaviest round since the war, Iran didn't really close the Strait of Hormuz. It's still open. Of course, you have to go through the Iranian side. And those ships that can pass through there are escorted by the United States. In other words, the Strait of Hormuz is open. Their doctrine, this new one, says it will close. But up until the time we're talking here on this live stream, 1:50 in the afternoon local time, the strait isn't closed. The strait remains navigable on both routes, on the Oman route and the Iran route. Iran also hasn't launched any drones toward Israel in our direction. There are reports that they fired at Jordan, but not at Israel, and Iran also hasn't announced any change in its nuclear doctrine, that maximum threat that the parliament put on the table yesterday, and that we explained here in our last live stream. These are the three weapons that Tehran still hasn't used: the strait, a total closure, Israel, and the bomb. Or they really can't close the strait like they promise. That's the truth, folks. As long as these three cards remain in the regime's hand, the back and forth stays under control. The day Iran plays one of them, the whole game changes. That's why I pay less attention to what the regime is shouting and more to what the regime is keeping. And this morning brought another chapter. And this one is tailor-made for you who made it this far in the video. The Revolutionary Guard's news agency confirmed it. The Americans struck with cruise missiles a railway bridge in Golestan province in northern Iran. A railroad bridge. Up north, far from the Strait of Hormuz, much farther than any previous target. It was struck early in the morning. Now you must be wondering, right? Why a railroad bridge in the middle of nowhere? Because this bridge, my friends, is not just any bridge. It's part of the railway that connects Iran to China. It's part of that railway passing through Turkmenistan. And lately it has also been bringing goods from Russia. And look at this detail that the Iranian agency itself confirmed. It's not me saying it. It's not a newspaper here in Israel. It's the Iranian agency itself. The movement of trains on this line increased a lot after the naval blockade. In other words, it was the overland escape route for Iranian trade. And now connect this with the China angle I showed you in the last live stream. China buying less than half of the oil. The hole in Iran's finances. The regime desperate for money. The American message in hitting this bridge is precise. If the sea closes again, if the blockade returns once more, there's no point in trying to escape by land. The front door and the back door answer to the same owner. In other words, there's no bridge, there's no contact at all with the other side. The Americans aren't just targeting Iran, they're building a real cage for it. Iran responded to being called scum. Remember when Trump called Iran scum, referring to the regime? This happened publicly yesterday. And Iran chose to respond in a way that also deserves your attention, because it's a lesson in propaganda. Iran knows how to market itself. They're marketers, folks. They're practically advertisers. The Iranian foreign minister wrote the following on social media. Addressing the Iranian nation with insulting language does not diminish its greatness. Iranians are known for their courtesy, culture, and moral values. We do not respond to rudeness with rudeness. We respond with action, without fear and with courage. End quote. Courtesy, culture, moral values. Written by the foreign minister of the same regime. That eliminated more than, according to the opposition, 80,000 protesters, right? That's the courtesy, that's the culture, right, folks? Also the one who fired the missile at a civilian ship in the middle of the night and demanded respect for the agreement at lunchtime. Courteous by day, missile by night. If you follow this channel, you know the Hebrew name for this, chutzpah. So it's shameless, right? Truly shameless. And the foreign minister's deputy, this chancellor from Aragas, added that Trump's words are not a sign of strength, but rather an admission of the failure of a policy based on force, sanctions, and threats. If this video is already keeping you updated, leave a like now because it helps this content reach more people. And before the next segment, a note that mixes geopolitics with soccer, also tailor-made for those of you who watch soccer. The Iranian president chose to attack the US using the World Cup. That's right. The World Cup that's happening now on American soil. He stated that the behavior of the United States as the host of the Cup reflects American foreign policy. Bending rules, right? Breaking the rules, humiliating rivals, creating obstacles, and cheating. And he went on to say the following, that Iran rejects this kind of game and stands firm on its rights. You see the move here, right? While the world is watching the fields over there in the United States, Iran is trying to turn even the World Cup into a tribunal against the United States. And just remember what we talked about here, right, weeks ago, about the world's spotlight being divided between mourning for Khamenei, which is happening now in Iran, and the goal over there at the World Cup. The regime understood this better than anyone. If the world is watching, the regime will battle for the narrative even in the stadium. Let me show you something few are connecting which supports the theory I've emphasized here for a while. You remember my take, right? Iran wants to drag Trump into another unpopular conflict on the eve of the November election because a defeated Trump in Congress is worth more to Tehran than any missile. For those who just tuned in, guys, here's the theory in 30 seconds for you, okay? And for those who aren't new here either. The United States elects a new Congress in November. That is, there's an election in November in what's called the midterm election. If Trump's party loses, he becomes a president with his hands tied for 2 years. And an American president loses this election, usually when gas prices go up too much and when the country gets involved in a conflict that doesn't end. In other words, for Iran to push Trump into this swamp right now is the cheapest weapon in their arsenal. Because in the last few hours, the American opposition's narrative has also started to take shape. One of the most well-known senators in the United States attacked Trump publicly, saying that restarting this reckless war won't make America stronger, it will cost more lives and waste more taxpayer money. He also said that after getting the United States into a war based on lies, Trump declared that the fighting would be over in less than a month. You notice the wording, right? Reckless war, based on lies, taxpayer money. This isn't anyone's analysis about the war. This is a campaign commercial being written in real time, folks. The campaign has already started over there. Each night of fire in the Gulf writes another paragraph of the opposition speech for November, and Iran knows this better than anyone. That's exactly Tehran's bet, to turn each round into one less vote for Trump's party. That's why time is short here, folks. Either Trump ends this story once and for all now, or he's going to get into trouble down the road, and Iran knows that. If he can't win in the midterm elections, it's over. Iran is practically free to do whatever it wants because the other side doesn't want this war. They don't want this war. The theory I presented to you here is playing out at news cycle speed. And now take a breath, because the next part is this clash that happened between Israel and the United States. It wasn't between the United States and Iran. At the NATO summit, they asked Trump about the Israeli troops in southern Lebanon, and his answer hit Jerusalem like a bucket of cold water. He said the following: "Yes, I think they will leave. I think they want to leave. We have an agreement with Israel and with Lebanon. Yes, they will leave, and I think it will work out very well." End quote. I mean, they will leave, said Trump, stated by President Trump as something already decided. He even said that he discussed this withdrawal with Netanyahu himself. And here you need to remember the thread we've been pulling on for a while now, right? Lebanon has become a bargaining chip against Israel. Macron asked for Israel to leave Lebanon. Iran required Israel to withdraw from Lebanon as part of the agreement. And now Trump announces the withdrawal as a done deal. 3 different pressures pushing on the same door. And just notice the detail, guys. The Iranian demand was exactly that. The Iranian foreign minister repeatedly cited the agreement's article making final negotiations dependent on Israel withdrawing from Lebanon. If Trump promises Israel's withdrawal in public, he's handing over to Tehran for free the bargaining chip that Tehran was demanding at the table. He's handing it over. It may not be, it may not happen, but he's handing it over in the middle of the week when the 2 countries are exchanging fire. And this morning, Israel responded. The defense minister, Israel Katz, said the following. Look at what he said, folks. Very important. We didn't ask anyone for permission to enter Lebanon, and we don't need permission to stay in Lebanon. Bluntly, right, folks? Listen to that again. If you need to, go back and listen one more time. We don't need permission to stay. On a normal day, this sentence here would probably be read as a message to Hezbollah or to the UN, but said the morning after Trump's announcement, it has a very clear recipient, and that's Trump himself. And Israel Katz also added, it is Israel's right to protect the people from Hezbollah, and Israeli forces will remain in southern Lebanon until Hezbollah is completely disarmed and the threat is totally removed. In other words, my friends, Trump says Israel will leave, and Israel says they're going to stay until the job is done. The American president announces the withdrawal, and the Israeli defense minister replies he didn't seek permission. This is not behind-the-scenes chatter. It's a public dispute during the year's hottest week. And my take here for you to keep in mind is that this connects with that window the Israeli analyst also pointed out. While Iran is busy taking hits from the Americans, Israel has a unique window to put pressure on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Leaving now would be squandering that window of opportunity. That's why the response was so harsh and so quick, and Israel is not going to trade the security of the North for diplomatic favors. And then you read and also remember that half smile from Netanyahu in the interview I mentioned, where he gave a little smile like this when they asked about the cancelled visit of the American defense minister. Remember that? He replied, "Why is this annoying if it was cancelled? Maybe this says something else, because, well, tonight's round, right, was the biggest since the end of the war with Israel." He already knew that. Netanyahu already knew. In other words, his smile made sense in less than 24 hours. And here on the channel, the Prime Minister's half smile is worth more than an official statement. So let's recap here, guys, with me. What happened since we turned off the camera yesterday in our last live that lasted almost an hour? The Americans kept their promise and carried out the biggest round since the end of the war. About 90 military targets in an entire port city in the dark. Iran retaliated against its neighbors and claimed 85 targets, setting the score of the ping-pong match that Analyst A has already talked about in terms of doctrine. So let's balance things out. Iran keeps repeating that if it is blocked, the strait will be Iranian forever, but for now it remains open, guys. The Americans hit weak points there, the ones that connect Iran to China, closing the back door and redrawing, guys. They're drawing the cage once again. The American opposition started writing the November speech, confirming this channel's thesis that everything is about the elections, and Trump announced that Israel is leaving Lebanon and heard from Israel that nobody asks for permission. And there's also a milestone happening right now. While we're watching this video, everything is happening. Khamenei's body, for those who forgot, guys, Khamenei's body arrives today in the city of Mashhad, in northeastern Iran, for the burial that ends 6 days of state funeral. Mashhad is the holiest city in Iran, the city where Khamenei was born. In other words, the circle closes where it began. And the regime buries the supreme leader with the country under fire, the ports in the dark, and the strait in dispute. The man who built this board for 36 years is laid to rest at the exact moment the board catches fire. And there are 3 milestones for you to watch. The promise of a doubled response. If Iran follows the new doctrine and responds with double the force, the escalation changes in scale this week. Hormuz, the doctrine says the strait closes after each round. It should be closed now. Every ship that crosses those waters in the next few hours tests whether the doctrine is real. And the call to Qatar, the Iranian foreign minister called the prime minister of Qatar in the last few hours. The same Qatar that accused Iran on Monday. Remember that? He answers the call from Tehran on Thursday. In the Middle East, no door ever closes completely. If someone manages to stitch together a way out, it'll be by a thread. That's true, folks. And 2 warnings from Trump are still hanging in the air, which haven't happened yet but could happen at any moment. The return of the naval blockade hasn't happened yet, which he said could happen at any time. And Karak Island, remember that island? The Iranian oil vault that he threatened to take, as long as those 2 are still on the table, every day starts with the potential to change the map. And now let's talk about the plane, because I still owe you this part, and stay tuned because we're also going to talk about Venezuela, folks. There's more important news about Venezuela here, and we're also going to talk about what's happening in real time over in Iran. In the last live stream, I mentioned that Trump used the old presidential plane again due to security concerns with the new one gifted by Qatar. Well, the story has gained another chapter. Reuters recorded Trump giving an interview in the air on his way to Washington inside the Qatar plane. That means he switched planes halfway through at an airbase in England, so that's the full picture. To leave the Middle East, the old plane was already in Europe, right? And he used the old plane to leave the Middle East, and in Europe, out of Iran's reach, he switched to the Qatar plane. According to some people who wrote in about this, right, the reason this happened is because the Qatar plane wouldn't have anti-missile systems, those flares that are released to intercept and shoot down missiles. This Qatar plane didn't have that system and they were afraid of being shot down, right? So they stopped flying it from the Middle East to Europe. Here's my take, guys. The gift is good, but only once the danger is gone, since it doesn't have all the equipment. Not even the world's most protected person would risk entering the range of Tehran's missiles. That shows how deep the distrust is here. And before I teach you the Hebrew word that wraps up this video, I need to tell you something, because in the middle of all this, in the midst of this night of fire, Israel did something that really sums up who Israel is. On the other side of the world, Venezuela, as everyone knows, was devastated by an earthquake. More than 3,000 people have lost their lives so far. At the time this video was recorded, tens of thousands were injured or homeless. And today, on the same day that Israel has soldiers operating on 3 fronts at the same time, in Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria, a new delegation, guys, because there's already a delegation there, a new Israeli relief delegation took off for Venezuela. A search and rescue team from the Home Front Command, that is, from the Israeli army, led by a general, is going to help rescue victims from the rubble on the other side of the planet. And here's another detail that really gets you, guys. Venezuela cut ties with Israel in 2009. The 2 countries haven't had any diplomatic relations for almost 20 years. It was the president of Venezuela herself who called asking the Israelis to stay longer. Look at that, guys, and to send more help. So consider this. A country that cut ties with Israel and spent years criticizing it internationally, who does it call when tragedy strikes? Israel. Think about that, lefty. While Iran sends missiles abroad and propaganda at home, Israel sends engineers and search dogs. Sniffer dogs used to rescue people from rubble, even in a country that doesn't recognize Israel. For now, it doesn't. Remember this image. It's worth more than 1,000 analyses. One side of the Middle East exports terror, the other exports aid and help. And deep down, the world knows how to tell the difference between the two. That's why, despite everything, I end this video with hope, thanks to a Hebrew expression that captures this moment. And it connects with a word you've already learned here. In the Accordo Live, I taught you the word nigmar, because the Middle East responded with the full version. Odlo nigmar, which means it's not over yet. Odlo nigmar. The agreement may be over, but the story is far, far from over. 80 targets, 85 responses are straight in dispute, a burial under fire, and 2 allies arguing in public. Odlo nigmar, it's not over yet. As long as it's not over, I'll be here every day, right? At least twice a day, putting the pieces together here for you. And now someone wrote there, talking and asking, but why haven't the United States eliminated any, not even one, none? An important one? Remember the idea I gave you here? For every ship that's hit, the United States should eliminate an important figure within the Iranian regime? According to an American law, I was exposed to this information which I didn't know before, right? I went to read about this today. There's a federal American law that prohibits the United States from eliminating political leaders on the other side of the world during a war. There is a prohibition within American law, okay, that forbids the United States from eliminating politicians, leaders. It's forbidden by law. But for Israel, this law doesn't exist. This law doesn't exist in Israel. Israel can eliminate a leader. They can go there and eliminate just like they eliminated Khamenei. It was Israel that eliminated him, not the United States. They can eliminate Aragas. They can eliminate anyone because there is no law that can stop Israel from doing this. Okay? So keep this information in mind because it's critical. And Iran knows this very well. Very well. So, once the first Miski missile hits Israel, Israel will retaliate by eliminating a leader there. That's what will happen. They know exactly what they're doing. Aguinaldo, thank you for the super chat. Rosanna, thank you. Eunice, the countries that demand Israel leave Lebanon should disarm the terrorists. I also fully agree with you. Thank you for the new expression in Hebrew, toda rabah. Every day, 1 word or 2 words. Slowly you write them down and learn. They're important words. It's another language, right? It doesn't hurt to learn a word here and there. David, Trump authorized the Ukrainians to manufacture Patriot missiles. Why didn't he allow Israel to produce these missiles? Would that be a good thing? These Patriot missiles are just a headache, folks. Just a headache. How many mistakes have already happened with these missiles? Did you forget? In Bahrain, for example. In Bahrain, the Patriot itself hit the city. I don't trust these missiles. I prefer the Israeli system. And Israel doesn't need to manufacture these missiles. Israel has its own defense system, right? There's the Iron Dome, you have the Arrow, there's David's Sling, now there's the laser, the Iron Beam. There are others still in development. There are others. Barak. There's also the Barak system that defends Cyprus. In other words, Israel doesn't need the Patriot. The Patriot isn't as efficient a system as it seems to be. So, shalom, David. That's right, I thought about that regarding this law, this US law. Regina, look. There's this law that they really can't eliminate leaders. I'm not talking about soldiers at war. I'm not talking about generals, about commanders. No, leaders, people, like the chief of staff, the president of the parliament. Anyway, those people, there's a law that prohibits it. But just so you can see how the West works, right, folks? The West, a law that forbids you from eliminating the head of the snake. How can a law like that exist? It's tough to understand. In today's world, there's a law that keeps you from removing the head of the snake. But on the other side, ask whether they have that law. They're always trying to take Trump's head off, right? Take his head off. So where's the law on the other side? Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you. Boat in stop mode. David, Trump authorized it. My friends, this is the current live stream. If anything serious happens in the Middle East, I'll come back at any moment. For those who missed the beginning of this live stream, go back to the start and watch it from the beginning. It's important you leave here knowing everything happening in the Middle East in real time. Hugs to all my friends. See you tonight in the next live stream.